This is part 24, and now as we know that we have started discussing right from section 378 up to section 462, which are offences against property, and then we had classified these offences under three different heads. One, if the person is deprived of his property, the manner in which he is deprived of his property determines criminal liability. It may be theft, it may be extortion, it may be robbery, it may be dacoity, it may be dishonest misappropriation, it may be criminal breach of trust, or it may be cheating also. These are the ways in which a person is deprived of his property. And there are some offences which can be committed with respect to movable property. There are some offences which can be committed with respect to immovable property. There are some offences which can be committed with respect to movable as well as immovable property. Now we start now discussing now the offences where there is these are the offences which can be committed with respect to immovable property. In other words, when I have a piece of land, or I have a flat, or I have a bungalow, what is my right? Nobody should deprive me of my quiet and peaceful enjoyment of the property. And if that is done by anybody, there starts his liability. Now, mind well one thing at this stage, as we shall be dealing with general exceptions, every now and then I will have to refer to the offences with which you are dealt when we shall be dealing with those general exceptions. For example, when we shall be dealing with the right of private defence of property, and especially when we shall be dealing with section 103, where we have to understand when the right of private defence of the property extends to the causing of death. It extends to the causing of death in case of robbery, in case of housebreaking by night, in case when there is a mischief by fire committed on any building, tent or vessel, which building, tent or vessel is used as a human dwelling or as a place for custody of property, or theft, mischief or house trespass under such circumstances as may reasonably cause apprehension that death or grievous hurt will otherwise be the consequence if such right of private defence is not exercised. So to understand this and the rest of the general exceptions with which we shall be dealing, you must know the offences. When we will start thinking of right of private defence of the property, there we will learn you have got right to defend your property and the property of any other person against any offence falling under the definition of theft, robbery, mischief or criminal trespass, or which is an attempt to commit theft, robbery, mischief or criminal trespass. At that time, I mean, it may not be possible for me to again repeat these offences, so I shall take it for granted. So this, I mean, once you learn the chapter, and that is the reason why first of all we have started with respect to what offences against property. As soon as we finish with offences against property, we shall start right from section 299 up to section 377 of the Indian Penal Code, dealing with offences affecting the human body, and then we will come to general exceptions. So now imagine a situation where when you want to understand that right of private defence of the property extends to the causing of death in case of housebreaking by night. Now what is this housebreaking by night? We want to understand, and in order to understand this housebreaking by night, the section that you are supposed to refer to is section 446 of the Indian Penal Code, which defines the offence of housebreaking by night. And then you read the section which says, whoever commits housebreaking after sunset and before sunrise is said to commit housebreaking by night. So one who has committed the offence of housebreaking after sunset before sunrise is what is known as housebreaking by night. So that you learn by reading section 446. The period has been mentioned. If the offence of housebreaking is committed after sunset, and if it is committed before sunrise, that is the duration, then it is labelled as what is known as housebreaking by night. So in order to understand housebreaking by night, you have to remember two terms forever: after sunset and before sunrise. That's all. But then it naturally follows that, well, what is this housebreaking? And in order to understand housebreaking, what we will have to do, we will have to refer to section 445 of the Indian Penal Code. And then once we start learning section 445 of the Indian Penal Code, we will come to know that if offence of house trespass is committed by any one of the 6 ways that are enumerated as far as section 445 is concerned, or the entry may not be by any one of the ways, but if the departure is by any one of the ways which are out of the 6 ways that are enumerated as far as section 445 is concerned, that amounts to the offence of housebreaking. But then, in order to know what do you mean by housebreaking, it is must for you to know what do you mean by house trespass. And in order to understand house trespass, naturally, you refer to section 442 of the Indian Penal Code, which defines the offence of house trespass. And then, as you just start reading section 442, it says, whoever commits criminal trespass. Now, what does it mean? It means, in order to understand the offence of house trespass, which is defined by section 442 of the Indian Penal Code, you must know the offence of criminal trespass, which is defined by section 141. So, to know section 446, as this is the practice that is required to be followed, you must know what is criminal trespass. You must know when the criminal trespass will amount to the offence of house trespass. You must know when a house trespass can be labelled as what is housebreaking, which is defined by section 445 of the Indian Penal Code, and then section 446, which defines the offence of housebreaking by night. Similarly now, whenever you want to know the offence of lurking house trespass by night, you have to, in order to, know this offence of lurking house trespass by night, you have to refer to section 444. But then, as you start reading section 444, which says, whoever commits lurking house trespass after sunset before sunrise is said to commit lurking house trespass by night. In other words, in order to know the offence of lurking house trespass by night, you must know the offence of lurking house trespass, which is defined by section 443 of the Indian Penal Code. So, section 443 defines the offence of lurking house trespass, but then as you start reading section 443, you will come to know that whoever commits house trespass, what does it mean? In order to know the offence of lurking house trespass, you must know the offence of lurking house trespass, and that is defined as far as section 443 defines the offence of lurking house trespass. But what is it? It is a form of house trespass, and hence, in order to know the offence of lurking house trespass, as you read section 443, you must know what is house trespass, for which you read section 442, and then in order to understand what is house trespass, you must know criminal trespass, which is defined by section 441 of the Indian Penal Code. This is the approach that you should have, so that it becomes very easy for you to understand the chapter with which we are dealing. Now we start discussing, though I have to, so I started right from section 446, that is not proper way. First of all, let us try to understand what is criminal trespass. And then, as we start learning criminal trespass, as a student of law, you will come across term, namely what is known as civil trespass, for which the person is liable as far as law of torts is concerned, for which you have what is known as you can claim unliquidated damages. Yes, that is a civil wrong, but it's not a breach of contract, with which we shall be dealing during course of time when you deal with the provisions regarding Indian contract and law of torts accordingly. But then this is the time where you will understand what is civil trespass. If you enter my building, if you enter my land without my permission, trespassers shall be prosecuted. Is that board that is displayed as far as some buildings are concerned? Then you enter. And why you have entered? You have entered for the purpose of asking somebody's address or whatever it might be. What is your liability? If you enter somebody's property without his consent, without his permission, then mind well, you have committed what is known as a civil trespass. But that is not a criminal trespass. There is a clear-cut distinction between civil trespass and criminal trespass. And now what is criminal trespass? It says, whoever enters into or upon property in the possession of another with intent to commit an offence or to intimidate, insult or annoy any person in possession of such property, or having lawfully entered into or upon such property unlawfully remains there with intent thereby to intimidate, insult or annoy any such person, or to with intent to commit an offence, is said to commit criminal trespass. So what is criminal? It is the state of the mind of an individual that is required to be taken into consideration from the point of view of determining criminal liability. So imagine a situation. As usual, we start with the illustration. A is having a bungalow. He has maintained beautiful garden around the bungalow. Mr. B is passing by the side of the bungalow. He is on the road and he is attracted by beautiful roses which are in the garden. Now Mr. B knew one law of the nature. And what is the law of the nature? Beauty is to be observed and not to be touched. With this, now he enters the garden. B enters the garden, and he enters the garden only for the purpose of observing the beauty of the roses in the garden. That's all, nothing more than that. He enters. But how he has entered? He has entered without seeking permission of the owner of the bungalow. He had first round around the bungalow. He had second round around the bungalow. Now what is his liability? It may be civil trespass because he has not entered with the permission, because that is not his property. It is not that you can go anywhere. No, certainly not. If the property belongs to somebody, if the piece of land belongs to somebody, when there is garden by the side of the bungalow, that is exclusively right of the owner to have quiet and peaceful enjoyment of the property. Nobody should deprive her of the same. And this man who entered, he never entered with what? With intent to commit an offence. He never intended to intimidate, insult or annoy the person. What is his liability? He is not liable for the offence of criminal trespass, but he is just liable only as far as civil trespass is concerned. And then when he had 5 rounds, the owner came to the balcony. Owner asked him, what are you doing? He is having round. He says, it's all right, now you please leave the garden. Don't be there in the garden. And this man continued. Even though he was asked by the owner to leave the garden, in other words, what we say, entry was lawful. Entry was lawful. Lawful in the sense, what I am trying to tell you, lawful means he had no intention to commit an offence. He had no intention to intimidate, insult or annoy. But now, once the entry is not by any one of he may be liable for civil trespass, with which you are not concerned for the timing, with which you shall be dealing in detail when you deal with law of torts, no doubt about it. But this is the case, is he liable for the offence of criminal trespass? And the answer is in the negative. But now when he is asked to leave, and if he remains there on that particular land, namely the garden, there starts his liability. When? If his intention is to commit an offence, if it is to intimidate, if it is to insult or if it is to annoy. Now here it may be proved in the court of law that he had no intention to commit an offence, he had no intention to intimidate, he had no intention to insult, but then in spite of the fact that you are told by the owner to leave and you continue, that is definitely to annoy him, and hence there starts your liability. So the section is classified under 2 different heads. Entry itself may amount to the offence of criminal trespass if Mr. B would have entered A's garden with intent to commit theft with respect to the flowers. Naturally, as the intention was to commit an offence, his entry becomes unlawful, and that amounts to what is known as criminal trespass, as it is defined by section 441 of the Indian Penal Code. So, whoever, in order to know criminal trespass, what you have to remember, whoever enters into or upon the property in possession of some other person another with intent to commit an offense, with intent to intimidate, insult or annoy. Now, offense is defined by the provisions of the Indian Penal Code, no doubt about it, but this intimidate, insult or annoy is nowhere defined in the Indian Penal Code. Then you have to, you refer to the provisions of the General Clauses Act, and then you will come to know that these are the terms which are not at all defined by the provisions of the General Clauses Act. You understand the meaning of it by referring to any standard dictionary which is available. So you refer to the standard dictionary but if the intention is to intimidate, insult or annoy, then that amounts to the offense. So what is it? You should not enter my property with intent to insult me. You should not enter my property with intent to intimidate me, with intent to annoy me, or with intent to commit an offense. Why? Because if that is your state of the mind with which you have entered, that is, this is my right, you deprive me of my right of quiet and peaceful enjoyment of the property. Hence, there starts your liability as far as section 441 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. So, entry itself may constitute liability for the offense of criminal trespass. Entry may be lawful. In other words, entry, at the time of you seek permission and you enter, no problem. You seek the permission of the Mr. B had sought the permission of the owner. Well, I want to observe the beauty of the nature. I want to observe how you have maintained the garden. May I come in? And he says, by all means you come. Entry is lawful. In this case, he is neither liable for the offense of criminal trespass nor civil trespass. Yes, very correct. But then he was there in the garden for a period of 2 hours or so. After that, owner told him, this is more than sufficient, now you leave the place. And he has taken a decision not to leave the place, but he says, well, let me be here for 3 more hours. And that has been objected by the owner, and he continues. If it is now, his intention is any one of the intents as dealt. And you have to remember what? When the intention is to commit an offense, when the intention is to intimidate, when the intention is to insult, or when the intention is to annoy, then naturally what we say, his liability is for the offense of criminal trespass as far as section 441 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. So this is regarding criminal trespass when person has entered the property, open land, or he is in the garden, and then he is in the garden only, garden which is by the side of the bungalow. His liability is for the offense of criminal trespass. Now, when this offense of criminal trespass can be labeled, so what is house trespass? House trespass is an aggravated form of criminal trespass, and hence we want to know what is the house trespass. If you read section 442, it says, whoever commits criminal trespass by entering into or remaining in any building, tent or vessel, which building, tent or vessel is used as a human dwelling, or as a place used as a place for worship, or as a place for the custody of the property, is said to commit house trespass. So what is house trespass? Whoever commits criminal trespass by entering into or remaining in any building, tent or vessel, which building, tent or vessel is used as a human dwelling, or any building used as a place of worship or as a place for custody of property, is said to commit house trespass. So as long as Mr. B was in the garden, his liability is for the offense of criminal trespass. But now if he enters any building, tent or vessel, so entry into any building, tent, so person commits the offense of criminal trespass. What is the presumption now? When he enters building, tent or vessel, his intention was to commit an offense, was to intimidate, insult or annoy. But when we talk about building, tent or vessel, which can be used as a human dwelling where human being resides, or any building, if he enters any building which is used as a place for worship, maybe temple, maybe church, maybe other some place over there. So if it is used, building is used as a place for worship, or as a place of custody of property. If that is used as a place for custody of property, for example, maybe warehouse, where go down, yes, that is the liability. So now as long as he is on the open space, his liability is for the offense of criminal trespass. But if he commits criminal trespass by entering into any building, tent or vessel, which building, tent or vessel is used as a human dwelling, or any building used as a place for worship or as a place for custody of property, is said to commit what is known as house trespass as far as section 442 is concerned. So as in case of section 442 also, the entry, you may enter somebody's house. For example, you may enter the house and you knock the door for the purpose of asking address. Yes, no problem. You are not liable for the offense of house trespass. Why? Because you have not committed criminal trespass. And why you have not committed criminal trespass? Because your intention was not to commit an offense, was not to intimidate, insult or annoy. That is the reason. And now once it is done by you, he has told you the address, that he doesn't know the address. You come back again and knock the door. He again tells you that, well, I do not know, I am newcomer to this particular locality. You again come and knock the door. Even though intention may not be to commit an offense, to intimidate, insult, it is definitely to annoy, and hence there starts your liability for the offense of house trespass defined by section 442 of the Indian Penal Code. In other words, entry into the house, that is by house we mean any building, tent or vessel, which building, tent or vessel is used as a human dwelling, or any building used as a place of worship or as a place for custody of property. Entry itself, if it is with intent, then that constitutes liability for the offense of house trespass. If it is not with that, entry may be lawful. But if you unlawfully remain there with any one of the intents, then there starts your liability as far as section 442 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. With this now, if you start, reading section 400, now when this house trespass will amount to the offense of house breaking is dealt as far as section 445 is concerned. As usual, please always read the illustrations which are given after the section, because it is by reading the illustrations it is possible for you to understand the ingredients of the section. So as you go on reading the illustrations and then correlate with the ingredients in order to understand it, that as you entry, if it is by any one of the 6 ways, or entry may not be, but if the departure is by any one of the 6 ways that are enumerated as per section 445 is concerned, then that will amount to the offense of housebreaking, which is an aggravated form of house trespass. Now, right from section 447 onwards are the sections which deal with punishment. And what is the punishment for criminal trespass? What is the punishment for house trespass? What is the punishment for house breaking? And what is the punishment for house breaking by night? Or what is the punishment for lurking house trespass by night? What is the punishment for lurking house trespass, or with which you shall be dealing as you start dealing with the sections which deal with punishment? So what section 445 says? It says a person is said to commit house breaking who commits house trespass if he effects his entrance into house or any part of it in any one of the 6 ways hereinafter described. So if his entry by any one of the 6 ways that are enumerated as per section 445 is concerned, that will amount to the offense of house breaking. Or if being in the house or any part of it for the purpose of committing an offense, or having committed an offense therein, he quits the house or any part of it in any one of the 6 ways, that is to say, and the 6 ways are enumerated. With this now, before we start discussing the 6 ways that are enumerated, let me point out your attention to the explanation to section 442. And it says the introduction of any part of the criminal trespasser's body is entering sufficient to constitute house trespass. So he should not, enter himself wholly. That is, full body should not enter. If he has just entered his hand through the window, or if he has just introduced his leg there is a space for him as far as after opening of the door is concerned. In that case, for example, introduction, what it says, the introduction of any part of the criminal trespasser's body is entering sufficient to constitute house trespass as far as section 442 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. And now the time for us to understand that, well, which are these 6 ways that are enumerated as far as section 446 of the Indian Penal Code is concerned. And then if you start reading now, but then before you reading, imagine a situation that person enters when the door is open, he commits theft, and while going out, instead of going through the door, he jumps out of the window, which is neither meant for human entry or human departure. What is his liability? He is liable for the offense of housebreaking. He finds out a he finds out a key, and with the help of the key he opens the door. He commits the offense of housebreaking. He makes a hole to the wall and enters through the hole that is made to the wall. He is liable for the offense of housebreaking. He is on the roof, removes the tile and there enters. He is liable for the offense of housebreaking. He climbs the building, second floor of the building, with the help of the drainage pipe, and through balcony he gets access to the room where he commits the offense of theft. He is liable for the offense of housebreaking as far as section 445 is concerned. The door which was to the gate was locked, and then he had opened that and he enters through that, or there was a fencing and he removes the fencing, or he jumps from the fencing and gets entry into it. Not only that, but then as we will deal with these 6 ways in detail, you will come to know, if he tells the servant that during night hours you don't bolt the door from inside, I will come commit theft and we will share the profits half. This also amounts to the offense of housebreaking as defined by section 445 of the Indian Penal Code. So what we intend to do now, this is the time where we intend to start discussing, I hope you have done the homework, discussing the 6 ways where the house trespass will amount to the offense of housebreaking, and then what do you mean by housebreaking by night and lurking house trespass by night, with which we will continue our discussion as far as next part of our lecture is concerned.